Would you please welcome the former Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. How are you today, Mr. Prime Minister?
I'm fine.
Is that what I should refer to you as? Because I know you've had many jobs in the Israeli government, foreign minister and prime minister and finance minister, UN ambassador.
Now, Bill, you want to start with a quarrel? You want to call me prime minister? I'm not going to argue with you.
No, and I know when Israeli politicians come to the United States, it usually means they're trying to get their old job back.
No, actually, it doesn't, because America is of interest to us, whether in opposition or in government. America is important for everyone.
But you do want your old job back?
Yes, I do.
Well, that's the kind of honesty we don't have here in America from our politicians. And I have heard you referred to many times as the most Americanized of the Israeli prime ministers. Do you find that to be a compliment?
If by that it means that you talk straight to your audience, I'll tell you what, I spent a few, yes, I would, but it's supposed to be derogatory because the idea of communicating with voters was an abstruse and alien idea in the party system that we had, which was more or less Tammany Hall. That was an American idea, too, that went by the wayside for a new American politics, and I prefer the new one with all its failings to the old one with all its corruptions.
Well, I don't know if we've gotten rid of all our corruption.
No, you haven't.
But I'll tell you one thing. Unlike America, Israel seems to be able to fight wars very quickly. What is your secret? Because we don't seem to have the hang of that.
The secret is that we have America.
Nah.
And America, you see, the point is that Israel, when it fights, is subject to international pressures, and the people who are fighting us are subject to international pressures. In fact, the kind of wars that we fight cannot last forever. They're either won or lost or drawn, but they end, and they end fairly quickly in the televised age. They're not sustainable beyond a few weeks. And I said as much on the first day of the Second Lebanon War. That's what we call it now. I said we have a limited time. Some Israeli politician actually said the hourglass is ticking. That's what they said. The hourglass is ticking. And I said, well, yeah, the clock is ticking, and that's why you should get as decisive a victory as you can in the shortest amount of time. The time factor is real for a country like Israel fighting a war. It's less real for a country like the United States.
But this is not over between you and Hezbollah. This is just halftime.
It's not between us and Hezbollah.
It's not between you and Hezbollah?
No.
Who is it between?
Us and Iran, you and Iran,
right.
The rest of the world and Iran. Hezbollah doesn't exist. People are clapping for Iran?
No, they're clapping that they think you got it right.
Well, I'm glad, because...
They, and I do too.
Well, Bill, I want to clarify what I mean by that. I think it's important. Look, Hezbollah I'm quite sure, kidnapped these three soldiers without getting clearance from their masters in Tehran. But once the fighting got going, they were essentially a forward unit of the Iranian army. They were trained by the Iranian army on Iranian soil, using Iranian weapons, using Iranian tactics, and their long-range weapons are controlled by Iranian officers. So this is a forward unit of the Iranian army, and therefore when we talk about Hezbollah, we're really asking, what does Iran want? It wanted a diversion from its nuclear weapons program, and it got it. But right now, I think it wants quiet because it wants to somehow pursue the completion of its plan to build atomic bombs, from which they intend to bomb us out of existence, but bomb many people and annihilate.
But they would never bomb you, would they? Because they know that you would hit them back. I've never understood why Israel is so coy about nuclear weapons. I mean, I know you have them. You know you have them. I think most countries that have nuclear weapons, probably they were built by Jewish scientists or the Chinese kid. But it's unrealistic to think that Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons or would not use them for its survival. So why be cagey about it?
Well, I think that, let's suppose for a second I'm going to avoid answering this question, okay? Here, I'm being openly evasive.
Okay.
So now having dispatched with that, let me address the other side of the equation of your question. Iran, you think, ought to perform or ought to act the way the Soviet Union acted. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons, the U.S. had nuclear weapons, and so there was a standoff, and in fact a nuclear peace established, right?
Yes.
Now, so you'd think, well, wouldn't Iran behave like the Soviet Union? Except that the Soviet Union and the Soviet communists in general always put their survival before their ideology, before their zealotry. You cannot rely on militant Islam, a militant Islamic regime like Iran to behave the same way. For example, you remember any Soviet suicide bombers? No. But militant Islam produces hordes of them, and they smash into buildings in New York, bringing down towers, smashing into the Pentagon. Now you had some people who were willing to blow themselves up, blow their children up, to bring down aircraft. This is a pathological creed, and it may be that the current leadership of Iran, which is a mad purist, Islamic fantasist, that would say, well, you know, we can get to heaven in a mad apocalyptic apocalypse where millions die on both sides. A disappeared imam, a religious holy man from about 1,000 years ago, would reappear. Millions would die on both sides, but the millions, the Islamic millions, would go to a Islamic heaven with all the trimmings, and you know that's not a bad heaven for them. So you think this is crazy? People can't really think that way. People can't re-engage in religious wars. That disappeared 300 years ago from mankind, or did it? Well, you have these people smashing into the World Trade Center. You have these incredible things happening because these people really mean it. And you cannot have these madmen acquiring atomic bombs because all the nuclear powers that you mentioned up to now have a control over the button. They are not mad. They understand the limits of the use of this weapon. That is not true of Iran. That's why it should not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons.
Okay. And I would agree with you that the people in Iran and many other Muslim countries are much too comfortable with the idea of the world coming to an end, but so are some of Israel's greatest supporters. Does it not make you a bit uncomfortable that the Christian right here in America, which backs Israel fervently, really does so because they think Jesus is going to return? Many of them believe he will do so in their lifetime. And when Jesus returns, he must return to whence he came. And what he's going to do when he gets there, basically, is convert all the Jews or kill them.
Well, you know, let's argue about that point when it happens, right? But I think that there's a huge difference, no matter what people believe in. The question is, what do you do about those beliefs? And it is not true, and there is not a parallelism between Christian evangelicals and Muslim militants. And I'll tell you what the difference is. Number one, the Christian evangelicals do not believe that they have to annihilate entire nations and initiate wars and bomb people into smithereens. They do not. They believe whatever they believe, but they do not believe this. And many of them are firmly committed to democracy. I think most of them, if not all of them. The second point is that they're basically sane people, and they're very careful. You can argue with this or that element of a person's belief, but in the case of militant Islam, you have something that deviates from Islam, that deviates from modernity, that deviates from anything that we've had in the post-Enlightenment period. They really don't accept the modern world. They don't accept choice. They don't accept free information. They don't accept women having the freedoms. They don't accept your children having the freedom to decide what it is they listen, hear, and do. And that is a very unforgiving and dangerous creed. We've never had this mad ideology armed with nuclear weapons. People always refer to Hitler, and in some sense there is a parallel. But in another sense there isn't, because Hitler entered a world conflict and then went to produce nuclear weapons. The great luck for us that he did that. Ahmadinejad is going about it the other way around. He's first creating the nuclear arsenal, and then he'll march onto the world stage and the world conflict. So far, he's just using proxies like Hezbollah. So we have to understand how dangerous this is. You do not want a latter-day Hitler with nuclear weapons. You really must stop that.
No, and it's always amazed me that among all the nations in the world, the one that gets compared to the Nazis the most in the world press is actually Israel. And I think that's...
You know why? You know why?
Well, the Jerusalem Post says it's because you need a local Bill Maher. It said the foreign ministry would do well to watch Bill Maher to learn how to sell Israel's case to a TV audience. What do you think? I could roll that way. I could, I mean...
Hey, Bill, watch it. You watch it. If I'm prime minister, you'll get the job.
I could roll that way, I'm telling you. If the Jews want to pay me, I love HBO, but, I mean, the other Jews.
Government salaries are not
point.
what you think, and I'm cutting them.
But do you think Israel does have an image problem?
Yes, I do. I think there's a reason why some people are so quick to compare Israel to the Nazis. Israel, that is a democratic country that exercises unbelievable restraint. You know, during the war, I was asked to, by our Knesset, our parliament, to go to London. We were being smashed by some of the British media, most of it. And they said to me, what do you say? I can imitate a British accent, but you get the point. What do you say about all these civilian casualties in Lebanon? And I said, do you really want to go that route? And he said, yes. What about the horrendous number, which was close to 1,000, undoubtedly a tragic number? I said, well, the only way we can say if we are proportionate or disproportionate is to look at the only other example of a city rocketed by about the same number of rockets, 4,000 rockets, and that's London. And Churchill's response was to obliterate Dresden and close to, I think, altogether 200,000 German civilians. They were bombed by day, firebombed by night, deliberately. So we are disproportionately restrained, because we seek to just attack the rocketeers who are committing a double war crime, both rocketing civilians and hiding behind civilians, both war crimes under the Fourth Geneva Convention. So why do people resort to this lie? Number one, European guilt. They did nothing to help the Jews during the Nazi Holocaust. And by comparing Israel to the Nazis, they absolve themselves and they say, you see, the Jews are just as bad. We're not. But they're very bad in making that comparison. We don't have that problem in America. I think the American people are eminently fair. By and large, the American media, which you occasionally castigate, and I appreciate your puncturing of hypocrisy and falsehood. But on the whole, the American people have it right, and they know who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. And we're fighting the same war against the same common enemies, or barbaric and evil. People who blow up children in a bus, or smash into buildings and kill thousands of people, or poison, try to poison airline passengers. These people are evil. They should be stopped.
And one of the concepts that was quoted in this article that I was trying to raise was that the world seems to want it both ways with the Jews. When they went to their slaughter, as they have been accused of in World War II, they said, how could the Jews do that? How could they let the Nazis just line them up and march right into the gas chamber? But then when they defend themselves, somehow the Jews are doing it without showing restraint. It seems to me the world just doesn't like it when the Jews win.
I think there's something in what you say, but I think it has to do with something related close by. I'll tell you what it is. For about 2,000 years, the Jew was the perfect victim. I mean, we had no land, no army, no government, no way to defend ourselves. So we were slaughtered with happy abandon by, sundry nations and movements and crazies. But having been a perfect victim, we were always perfectly moral, because if you're just on the receiving end of tremendous violence, pogroms, massacres, expulsions, Holocaust, then you are perfectly moral. And the world got used to the idea that the Jew is a victim. Now, when we refuse to be a victim, after the latest and greatest pogrom, the Holocaust, took place, we reestablished our state, raised an army to defend ourselves. Now we are on the world scene, and we have to fight these terrorists, and we have to decide what to do when they rocket us from civilian neighborhoods, and we take action, and occasionally Unintentionally, of course, civilians get killed. Now we've deviated from that perfection of powerlessness into power. And I think there's a real historical adjustment that is yet to take place in the perception of a large portion of mankind towards the Jews. Well, we refuse to be victims, and we're not going to be annihilated again, and we will defend ourselves with the same moral code that any democratic and normal society would apply to itself. We're just not going back into those gas chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I hope you rejoin us when you are the Prime Minister again. Thank you. Benjamin Netanyahu.